What if everything we knew about Harry Potter's childhood was different? What if instead of growing up in a cupboard under the stairs, unloved and unwanted, Harry Potter grew up with his mother? But here's the twist that changes everything. What if the man who helped raise him, the father figure in his life, was none other than Severus Snape? The man who, in our original timeline, spent years tormenting Harry because he looked too much like James Potter. Today, we're diving into one of the most emotionally complex alternate timelines in the Harry Potter universe, where love, loss, and redemption create an entirely different boy who lived. Picture the night of October 31st, 1981. Godric's Hollow. Voldemort arrives at the Potter cottage, and everything begins the same way. Peter Pettigrew has betrayed the Potters. The Dark Lord ascends the stairs. But in this timeline, when Voldemort breaks through the door to Harry's nursery, James Potter doesn't tell Lily to take Harry and run. Instead, in a split-second decision driven by pure instinct, James interposes himself directly between Voldemort and his family in a slightly different position. The killing curse hits James first, but his sacrifice, his absolute love and willingness to die, it creates a different kind of magic than we saw in the original timeline. Lily doesn't get the chance to stand in front of Harry because James's body literally shields them both for that crucial moment. When Voldemort turns his wand on Harry, Lily throws herself forward, and something unprecedented happens. The protection James created with his sacrifice combines with Lily's ancient magic, her willingness to die, and it doesn't just rebound the killing curse. It creates an explosion of protective magic so powerful that it still destroys Voldemort's body, still creates the lightning bolt scar on Harry's forehead, but it doesn't kill Lily. She's thrown backward, unconscious, severely injured, but alive. When Hagrid arrives at the destroyed cottage, he finds James Potter dead in the doorway, baby Harry crying in his crib with that fresh scar, and Lily Potter barely breathing but miraculously alive among the rubble. The next hours are chaos. Lily is rushed to St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. Dumbledore arrives and he faces an unprecedented situation. His plan had been to place Harry with the Dursleys, to use Lily's sacrifice and her blood relation with Petunia to create the most powerful protection possible. But Lily is alive. The protection is already in Harry's blood because of what both his parents did, and Dumbledore must face a grieving mother who has just lost her husband and has no intention whatsoever of giving up her son. Lily Potter, lying in that hospital bed, makes it absolutely clear. Harry will not be going to Privet Drive. She will not allow her son to be raised by her sister Petunia, who has hated magic since they were children, who called Lily a freak, who married Vernon Dursley specifically because he was the most unmagical, normal person imaginable. Dumbledore tries to explain about the blood wards, about the protection, but Lily counters with a truth he cannot deny. She is Harry's mother. Her blood, her love, her sacrifice is literally running through Harry's veins. The protection isn't gone. It's simply different now. But there's a problem. Lily is a widow with a 1-year-old child. She's a target. Every Death Eater who escaped Azkaban, everyone still loyal to Voldemort, everyone who wants revenge. They all know who defeated the Dark Lord. They know where to find the Potters, or at least where to start looking. Lily can't go back to Godric's Hollow. The cottage is destroyed and it would never be safe again. She can't stay with the Weasleys or any Order member because that puts them at risk. Her parents are dead. She has nowhere to turn. And then, in one of fate's strangest twists, Severus Snape requests an audience with Dumbledore. Snape, who had begged Voldemort to spare Lily, who switched sides entirely because of his love for her, who has been racked with guilt believing he caused her death. When he learns that Lily survived, it breaks something in him and rebuilds it simultaneously. The woman he loved since childhood is alive, but she's a widow because of information he brought to Voldemort. James Potter is dead, and while Snape hated James, he knows that Lily loved him. The weight of this guilt is crushing, but Snape goes to Dumbledore with a proposal born of desperation and devotion. He owns his childhood home, Spinner's End in Cokeworth. It's not much, a small, run-down house in a Muggle neighborhood, but it's paid for. It's heavily warded after years of Snape's paranoid spell work. And most importantly, no Death Eater would think to look for Lily Potter there. It's so beneath what the Potters represented so far from their usual circles that it's the perfect hiding place. Snape offers his home to Lily and Harry. He doesn't ask to live there with them. He expects to continue his life at Hogwarts as a professor, perhaps visiting to maintain the wards. It's an offer of protection, of penance, of a debt he can never truly repay. Dumbledore, ever the chess master, sees the potential in this arrangement, though perhaps not all the implications. He sees a safe house for Lily and Harry. He sees Snape's continued loyalty secured by proximity to the woman he loves, and he sees a scenario where Harry grows up hidden from the wizarding world's spotlight. What he doesn't fully anticipate is how human connection works, how grief and loneliness can forge the strangest bonds. When Dumbledore presents this option to Lily, her first reaction is complicated. Severus Snape, her childhood best friend who called her a mudblood in front of everyone, who chose darkness, who joined the Death Eaters, who worked for the man who killed James. But Dumbledore also tells her something else, something he feels she deserves to know now. Snape came to him and begged him to hide the Potters. Snape offered his own life to protect her. Snape switched sides entirely out of love for her. And most gutting of all, Snape has been torturing himself, believing he caused her death. Lily is a remarkable woman, something that often gets lost in the mythos of Harry Potter. She was brilliant at magic, particularly charms and potions. She was kind but fierce. She stood up to the Marauders when they bullied Snape despite being friends with them. She saw good in people but wasn't naive. And now, sitting in St. Mungo's holding her son, a widow at 21, she makes a decision that will reshape the entire wizarding world. She agrees to meet Severus. Their meeting is one of the most emotionally devastating conversations imaginable. Snape can barely look at her, this woman he's loved since he was 9 years old, knowing that her husband is dead partially because of him. He expects her hatred, her rage, her disgust. What he doesn't expect is for Lily to cry. She cries for James, for the life they were supposed to have, for everything Voldemort took from them. And then she does something that Snape never anticipated. She acknowledges that he tried to save them. She doesn't forgive him, not entirely, not yet, but she acknowledges that he switched sides, that he's been protecting them as much as he could. Their conversation is long and painful. Lily demands the truth, all of it. Why did he join the Death Eaters? Why did he bring that prophecy to Voldemort? What did he think would happen? Snape, for perhaps the first time in his life, is completely honest. He talks about his childhood, his abusive father, the poverty, the desperation to be powerful enough that no one could hurt him again. He talks about how intoxicating it was to finally be respected at Hogwarts, to be feared, to belong to something. He talks about the dark arts and how they called to someone with his anger and pain. And he talks about his love for her, not as a plea for reciprocation, but as an explanation for why he eventually betrayed Voldemort. Lily listens. And in listening, she begins to understand something crucial. They are both grieving. She's grieving James, the life she lost, her sense of safety. He's grieving his own choices, the friendship they once had, the person he might have been if things had been different. And in that shared grief, in the ruins of everything they both once had, they begin to build something unexpected. Not romance, not yet, perhaps not ever in the way Snape once dreamed, but a connection forged in trauma and tentative trust. Lily agrees to take Spinner's End as a refuge, but she makes conditions. Snape will not simply hand over the keys and disappear. If he wants to protect them, truly protect them, then he needs to be present. He needs to maintain the wards in person. He needs to be someone Harry can trust, not a distant guardian, but a real presence in their lives. It's a test in many ways. If Severus Snape truly wants redemption, if he truly wants to make amends, then he needs to do the hardest thing possible for someone like him. He needs to be vulnerable. He needs to be part of a family. Snape agrees, though the prospect terrifies him more than facing Voldemort ever did, and so begins the strangest domestic arrangement in wizarding history. Lily Potter moves into Spinner's End with 1-year-old Harry. Severus Snape, still teaching at Hogwarts during the school year, becomes a weekend visitor, a holiday resident, a constant presence in the wards and protections around the house. The first months are awkward beyond belief. Snape doesn't know how to act around a toddler. Harry is initially frightened of this strange, dark man with the hooked nose and severe expression. Lily is navigating single motherhood while processing trauma and grief. But slowly, incrementally, things begin to shift. Snape proves himself useful in unexpected ways. He's meticulous about the house's defenses, creating ward schemes that would make even the most paranoid Auror jealous. He stocks the pantry with precision, remembering what Lily liked to eat from their childhood. He's surprisingly patient when Harry has nightmares, perhaps because he understands them all too well. He creates a potion to help Lily sleep through her own night terrors after Voldemort's attack. He doesn't try to replace James. He's too smart for that and too aware of his own limitations. Instead, he becomes something else entirely. A protector, a presence, eventually a friend again. Lily, for her part, begins to see glimpses of the boy she once knew. When Snape carefully tends the small garden behind Spinner's End, she remembers the boy who used to show her magical plants by the river. When he sits reading advanced potion theory by the fireplace, she remembers studying together in the Hogwarts library. When he makes a dry, cutting joke about one of Dumbledore's more eccentric decisions, she remembers why she found him funny before everything went wrong. It's not forgetting what happened. It's rediscovering what was buried underneath years of bad choices and pain. As Harry grows from toddler to young child, he becomes the bridge between them. Harry, unlike his father, doesn't have years of animosity with Snape. To Harry, Severus is simply Sev, the strange man who lives in their house sometimes, who makes Mummy smile occasionally, who knows everything about everything and is willing to answer Harry's endless questions with actual answers rather than condescension. Harry Potter, in this timeline, grows up secure in his mother's love, but also exposed to Severus Snape's particular brand of cynical intelligence. Imagine Harry at 3 years old, already showing signs of accidental magic, and instead of it being frightening or punished, Snape is there to explain exactly what's happening and why. Imagine Harry at 4, asking questions about why people are afraid of magic, and getting honest answers about prejudice and fear rather than platitudes. Imagine Harry at 5 watching Snape brew potions in the basement laboratory he's set up, learning that magic is about precision and understanding, not just waving a wand and hoping. This Harry Potter doesn't grow up ignorant of the magical world. He doesn't grow up abused or neglected, but he also doesn't grow up with the same innocent optimism that original Harry somehow maintained despite everything. This Harry is loved fiercely by his mother, but he's also being inadvertently shaped by Severus Snape's worldview. He learns to be observant, to question motives, to trust actions over words. He learns that magic is beautiful but dangerous, that power without control is disaster, that the world is far more complex than heroes and villains. The relationship between Lily and Severus continues to evolve in complicated ways. There's no sudden romance, no fairy tale transformation. Lily loved James, and she mourns him genuinely. Snape's love for Lily is something he carries but doesn't burden her with. But they're living together, raising a child together, surviving together. They argue about discipline methods, about how much to tell Harry about his father, about whether Snape is too harsh in his teaching. They also laugh together, something neither of them expected to do again. They share the exhaustion of parenting. They build inside jokes. They create new memories that aren't overshadowed by Hogwarts and the Marauders and Death Eaters. When Harry is 7, something shifts more permanently. Maybe it's Snape teaching Harry to brew his first real potion, a simple cure for boils, and the pride in his eyes when Harry succeeds. Maybe it's Lily watching Snape braid Harry's messy hair with surprising gentleness before bed. Maybe it's a night when Lily has a particularly bad nightmare about Godric's Hollow and wakes to find Snape already awake, brewing calming draught, sitting with her in the kitchen until dawn without judgment. Maybe it's all of these moments accumulated. But at some point, Lily realizes that Severus Snape has become essential to her life in ways she never intended. They have a conversation, inevitably, about what they are to each other. Snape expects nothing. He's learned not to hope for too much. Lily is honest in a way that perhaps only she can be. She doesn't love him the way she loved James. That first, youthful, passionate love belongs to her late husband and always will. But she loves Severus differently, a love built on trust earned through years of shared life, through watching him choose to be better every single day, through the partnership they've built in raising Harry. It's not the love story Snape dreamed of as a boy, but it's real, and it's more than he ever thought he'd have. They marry quietly when Harry is 8. No big ceremony, no publicity. Just a simple bonding in the living room of Spinner's End, with only Dumbledore as witness, because they need to make the protective magic official, to tie Snape legally to Harry for additional security, but also because after years of being a family in practice, they decide to become one in magic. Harry, who has never known his father except through stories and photographs, doesn't call Snape Dad. He calls him Severus or Sev, and that's perfectly fine. Snape isn't trying to replace James Potter. He's something else, something new, a second father figure built on different foundations. Harry Potter at age 10, 1 year before Hogwarts, is a fundamentally different person than the Harry we know. Physically, he's healthier, better fed, taller. He still has his mother's green eyes and his father's messy black hair, still has that lightning bolt scar on his forehead. But his demeanor is different. He's confident without being arrogant, having grown up loved but also held to high standards by Snape. He's intelligent and curious, having been encouraged to question everything. He's more serious than most 10-year-olds, having grown up with regular discussions about Voldemort, Death Eaters, and the war, even though Lily tries to keep it age-appropriate. Most significantly, Harry is magically advanced for his age. Snape has been teaching him theory since he was old enough to read. Not spellcasting, that would be illegal and dangerous without a wand, but magical theory, potion ingredients and their properties, the principles of transfiguration, the complexities of charms. Lily has been teaching him too, her specialty in charms making her an excellent instructor. By the time Harry is 10, he has a better theoretical understanding of magic than most third-year Hogwarts students. He's also been brewing simple potions under Snape's supervision since he was 7, giving him hands-on experience most students never get. Harry knows about his father, of course. Lily makes sure of that. There are photographs all over Spinner's End, pictures where James waves and grins, frozen in time at 21. Lily tells stories about James's courage, his loyalty to his friends, how he stood up to Voldemort for his family. Snape, in a remarkable show of growth, contributes to these stories. Not dishonestly, but he shares the truth about James's bravery even while being honest about their mutual hatred. Harry grows up understanding that people are complicated, that his father and Severus were enemies who both loved his mother, that good people can do bad things and bad people can choose redemption. Sirius Black's situation is different in this timeline. When he's arrested for supposedly betraying the Potters and murdering Peter Pettigrew, Lily is alive to tell the truth. She knows Sirius was their secret keeper initially, but more importantly, she knows Sirius would never betray James. She pushes for an investigation, demands veritaserum testimony, and makes enough noise that Dumbledore intervenes more directly. The truth about Peter Pettigrew comes out within weeks. Pettigrew is caught before he can fully escape, his animagus form discovered, and Sirius is exonerated. Sirius's relationship with Lily after James's death is complicated and painful. He was James's best friend, closer than a brother. Part of him irrationally blames himself for James's death, for not insisting hard enough that they keep him as secret keeper. Another part of him struggles with seeing Lily alive when James is gone. And then there's the Severus Snape complication. Sirius despises Snape with every fiber of his being. Learning that Lily is living with Snape, that Snape is helping raise Harry, James's son, it nearly drives him mad with rage. The confrontation between Sirius and Snape, in Spinner's End's living room with Lily mediating, is explosive. Sirius accuses Snape of manipulating Lily, of using her grief, of stealing James's family. Snape, for once in his life, doesn't rise to the bait. He simply states that he's protecting Lily and Harry, and what Sirius thinks of him is irrelevant. Lily shuts down the argument by making her position clear. She chose this. She chose to trust Severus. She chose this life for Harry, and if Sirius wants to be part of Harry's life, if he wants to honor James's memory by being the godfather James chose him to be, then he needs to accept her decisions. It takes years for Sirius to partially accept the situation. He never becomes friends with Snape. That's impossible, but he learns to be civil for Harry's sake. He visits Spinner's End regularly, bringing stories about James, teaching Harry about the Marauders, taking him for flying lessons that Snape grudgingly approves. Harry gains another piece of his history through Sirius, another perspective on who his father was. The dynamic is tense and often uncomfortable, but it's real. Harry has his mother, his stepfather who refuses to be called that, and his godfather who hates his stepfather. It's messy and complicated and human. Remus Lupin is more gracious about the situation than Sirius, though no less pained. Remus loved James too, and seeing Lily alive but James gone tears at him. But Remus understands complicated situations. His entire life as a werewolf has been one complication after another. He respects Lily's choices and is grateful that Harry is safe and loved. His relationship with Snape remains cold, memories of their school days creating permanent distance. but they can work together in the same room for Harry's benefit. Remus becomes another regular visitor to Spinner's End, another teacher, another connection to James. Harry's knowledge of his parents' past, of the Marauders, of Snape's history, is far more complete than original Harry ever had. He knows about his father's bullying, something Lily insists on being honest about. He knows about Snape calling Lily a mudblood. He knows about Sirius and Remus and Peter's animagus forms. He knows about Remus's lycanthropy, something the adults explain carefully when he's 9. He knows that Snape was a Death Eater and what that means. Harry grows up without illusions about anyone being perfect, understanding that people are defined by their choices and their efforts to be better. The summer before Harry's 11th birthday is bittersweet. They all know what's coming. The Hogwarts letter arrives, delivered by a very confused owl who has to navigate Spinner's End's excessive wards. Harry is excited. He's been preparing for this his entire life. Lily is proud but terrified of letting him go. Snape is concerned about how Harry will navigate Hogwarts given his unique background and unusual education. They all know that Harry going to Hogwarts will expose him to the wizarding world's attention in ways they've avoided for 10 years. The trip to Diagon Alley for school supplies is Harry's first real exposure to his fame. Until now, he's lived quietly in Cokeworth, homeschooled by Lily and Snape, interacting mainly with a small circle of trusted adults. But in Diagon Alley, people recognize him, the boy who lived, the child who defeated you-know-who. Strangers want to shake his hand, touch his scar, ask him questions. Harry finds it overwhelming and slightly disturbing. He's not used to being treated like a celebrity. He's just Harry, a kid who likes potions and reading and arguing with Severus about whether dragon blood is really necessary in certain elixirs. Lily and Snape close ranks around him, Snape's intimidating presence helping to ward off the most aggressive gawkers. It's a preview of what Harry will face at Hogwarts, and none of them are comfortable with it. That evening, back at Spinner's End, they have a serious discussion about what Harry should share about his life, about Snape, about their family situation. Snape advocates for secrecy, suggesting Harry simply not mention their connection. Lily argues for honesty, saying that lies always come out eventually. Harry, showing wisdom beyond his years, suggests a middle ground. He'll be honest if asked directly but won't volunteer information. He'll let people make assumptions and correct them only if necessary. September 1st arrives with all the anxiety and excitement such moments carry. Platform 9 3/4 is crowded with students and parents. Lily hugs Harry tightly, making him promise to write regularly and to find Professor McGonagall if he needs help. Snape's goodbye is more restrained but no less meaningful. He tells Harry to pay attention in all his classes, including potions, even though Snape will be teaching it and won't show favoritism. He tells Harry to be careful, to trust his instincts, and somewhat cryptically, to remember that not all Slytherins are Death Eaters, and not all Gryffindors are heroes. Harry boards the Hogwarts Express with mixed feelings. Excitement about finally attending Hogwarts, anxiety about the fame he knows awaits him, and a strange sadness about leaving the only home he's ever known. He finds an empty compartment and settles in, watching the platform disappear as the train pulls away. He doesn't stay alone for long. A red-haired boy pokes his head in, introducing himself as Ron Weasley, followed shortly by a bushy-haired girl named Hermione Granger, who's looking for a toad. Harry's interaction with Ron and Hermione is familiar yet different. He's friendly but more reserved than original Harry, a product of Snape's influence and his own unusual upbringing. When Ron recognizes him as Harry Potter and asks excitedly about defeating Voldemort, Harry's response is measured. He explains that he was a baby, he doesn't remember it, and he doesn't particularly enjoy being famous for something he didn't consciously do. It's a more mature response than most 11-year-olds would give, and it sets a tone for his relationships going forward. Hermione is fascinated when she realizes Harry has read extensively in magical theory. They bond over books, discussing magical concepts that most first years wouldn't encounter until later years. Ron is slightly overwhelmed by this display of knowledge, but likes Harry's down-to-earth demeanor, despite his fame and intelligence. The three of them form a tentative friendship on that train ride, though it's built on different foundations than original timeline. Harry isn't the bewildered orphan discovering magic for the first time. He's a well-prepared student who's unusually knowledgeable and somewhat guarded about his personal life. The sorting ceremony is where things get truly interesting. When Harry sits on the stool and the sorting hat settles onto his head, he braces himself. The hat immediately starts talking, intrigued by what it finds in Harry's mind. It sees Lily's kindness and loyalty, traits that would suit Hufflepuff. It sees James's courage and daring, clear Gryffindor material. But it also sees something the hat didn't find in original Harry, Snape's influence. It sees cunning, ambition not for power but for knowledge, a strategic mind that thinks 3 steps ahead, resourcefulness, and a certain disregard for rules if there's a good reason. The hat debates with itself audibly, which is unusual enough that the Great Hall grows quiet. Gryffindor, where Harry's parents were, where he would be expected, or Slytherin, where his abilities and mindset might actually flourish better, where Snape himself was sorted. Harry, in his mind, doesn't argue with the hat like original Harry did. He's been raised to see value in all houses, to understand that Slytherin isn't inherently evil despite its reputation. He trusts the hat to make the right choice, and after what feels like an eternity, but is probably only 2 minutes, the hat makes a decision that sends shockwaves through the Great Hall. Slytherin. The silence is deafening for a moment. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, son of 2 famous Gryffindors, the child who defeated the most infamous Slytherin in history, has been sorted into Slytherin House. The Slytherin table erupts in amazed applause, unsure what this means, but thrilled to have such a famous student. The other houses are stunned. At the staff table, Minerva McGonagall looks horrified. Dumbledore's expression is carefully neutral, but his eyes are sharp with calculation. And Severus Snape, for just a moment, allows the tiniest smile to cross his face before his usual impassive mask returns. Harry walks to the Slytherin table with his head held high, refusing to show uncertainty even though he's very aware of how unprecedented this is. He sits down among students who are looking at him with a mixture of awe, suspicion, and calculation. Draco Malfoy, who Harry recognizes from Madame Malkin's shop where they met during the Diagon Alley trip, looks particularly conflicted. On one hand, Harry Potter is famous and powerful. On the other hand, his father Lucius has spent years talking about how the Potters were blood traitors who supported Dumbledore. The feast proceeds with Harry feeling hundreds of eyes on him. Students from other houses keep glancing over at the Slytherin table where Harry sits. When desserts disappear and Dumbledore begins his start-of-term announcements, Harry notices the headmaster's gaze settling on him several times. He also catches Snape looking at him once, and while Snape's expression doesn't change, Harry thinks he sees approval in those dark eyes. After the feast, when the Slytherin prefects lead the first years down to the dungeons for the first time, Harry takes in his new house's common room with interest. It's everything the story said. Under the lake, with greenish light filtering through the windows, decorated in silver and green, filled with dark leather furniture and an atmosphere of ambition and pride. The other Slytherin students are still uncertain how to treat him. Harry Potter is a celebrity, but he's also the son of Lily Potter, a Muggleborn, which makes him half-blood at best in their pure blood-obsessed hierarchy. Draco Malfoy approaches Harry that first night in the dormitory they'll share. Draco has clearly been raised on stories about the Potters, about Harry specifically, and he's trying to reconcile those stories with the reality of Harry being sorted into Slytherin. Draco tries to offer his friendship in that arrogant way privileged children do, suggesting that Harry will need to choose his friends carefully at Hogwarts, that not all wizarding families are equal. It's nearly the same speech he gave in the original timeline. But Harry's response is very different. Harry, who has been raised by Severus Snape and learned to read subtext and power plays, sees right through Draco's approach. He politely but firmly tells Draco that he'll choose his own friends based on their character, not their family names. He doesn't insult Draco, doesn't make an enemy, but he establishes clear boundaries. Draco, unused to being handled this way by another 11-year-old, doesn't quite know how to respond. It sets up their relationship as something more complex than the outright enmity of original timeline, but also not the friendship Draco was hoping to establish. Harry's first week at Hogwarts is an adjustment. The classes themselves are easier than expected because of his preparation. In Transfiguration, when McGonagall expects first years to struggle with turning a match into a needle, Harry succeeds on his 3rd try, the only student in the class to manage it that day. McGonagall is impressed but also clearly troubled by his Slytherin sorting. In Charms, Flitwick is delighted to have such an enthusiastic and knowledgeable student. In herbology, Harry's practical knowledge from helping Snape gather potion ingredients serves him well. In history of magic, he struggles to stay awake like everyone else because Binns is terrible regardless of how prepared you are. And then there's potions with Severus Snape. Harry has been anticipating this class with mixed feelings. He loves potions, has been brewing them for years, knows he's good at it. But he also knows that Snape cannot show him any favoritism, cannot treat him like the stepson he's essentially become. What Harry doesn't expect is for Snape to be harsher on him than on anyone else. When Snape sweeps into the dungeon classroom on that first day, his dramatic entrance is the same as always. His speech about the subtle science and exact art of potion making is one Harry has heard variations of his entire life. But when Snape starts questioning students to assess their knowledge, he targets Harry specifically and publicly. Snape asks Harry increasingly difficult questions, far beyond first-year level. Harry answers each one correctly, drawing on years of education. To the other students, it looks like Snape is trying to embarrass Harry Potter and failing. To Harry, it's a test and a message. Snape will not go easy on him just because they're family. In fact, Snape expects more from Harry than from anyone else. When the students begin actually brewing their potions for the day, a simple cure for boils that Harry has made dozens of times, Snape criticizes Harry's stirring technique even though the potion is perfect. It's brutal and confusing for Harry, but he understands the necessity, even as it stings. The other Slytherins watch this interaction with fascination. Some, like Draco, see it as proof that Snape favors Slytherin House but won't show favoritism to famous students. Others wonder if there's more to the story. Hermione Granger, who's in the class representing Gryffindor alongside Ron, is outraged on Harry's behalf even though they're not particularly close yet. She speaks up, pointing out that Harry's potion is actually perfect and Snape is being unfair. Snape turns his cold gaze on her, takes 5 points from Gryffindor for speaking out of turn, and continues the class. Harry catches Hermione's eye and gives her a small, grateful smile even though he knew Snape was testing him. Over the following weeks, Harry settles into Hogwarts life but remains somewhat apart from his housemates. He's friendly and helpful, will study with anyone who asks, but he doesn't fully integrate into Slytherin's social dynamics. The pure-blood supremacy that many Slytherin students are raised with makes him uncomfortable, though he's learned from Snape to challenge it through questions and logic rather than open confrontation. When students make casual comments about Muggle-borns being inferior, Harry asks pointed questions about magical theory and talent that highlight the flaws in blood-based prejudice. It makes him unpopular with some students but earns him grudging respect from others. Harry's friendship with Hermione develops differently than original timeline. She's in Gryffindor, he's in Slytherin, but they share a love of learning and a tendency to question everything. They study together in the library, debate magical theory, and find themselves naturally drawn to each other's company despite house divisions. Ron is more peripheral to this friendship. He likes Harry well enough, but finds both Harry and Hermione a bit too intense about academics. Still, the three of them form a tentative group, especially after the troll incident on Halloween. The Halloween troll situation unfolds similarly to original timeline in some ways, but differently in others. Hermione, upset after Ron makes a thoughtless comment about her being insufferable, hides in the girls' bathroom. The troll is released into the school. Harry realizes Hermione doesn't know about the danger and acts immediately to warn her, Ron following reluctantly. But this Harry has been trained by Severus Snape. When they find Hermione cornered by the troll, Harry doesn't panic. He uses a strategic combination of levitation charm, which he's practiced extensively, and potions knowledge to create a distraction with ingredients from his bag. He targets the troll methodically, working with Ron rather than just improvising wildly. They still barely survive, and McGonagall still finds them. But when Harry explains what happened, his calm, strategic recounting of events impresses her even as she takes points and assigns detention. Hermione backs up his story but also credits Harry with saving her life through smart action rather than luck. McGonagall looks at Harry with new assessment in her eyes, seeing perhaps a glimmer of strategic thinking she associates more with Slytherin than with reckless Gryffindor bravery. The troll incident bonds Harry, Hermione, and Ron in friendship, even across house lines. The Philosopher's Stone plot still exists in this timeline. Dumbledore still hides it at Hogwarts, though his reasons are somewhat different with Lily alive. He's still trying to trap whoever might come for it, still using it as bait. Harry still notices the suspicious activity around the third-floor corridor, but his investigation is more careful, more methodical than original timeline Harry's. Snape can't drop hints the way he did originally because his relationship with Harry is too visible now that Harry's in Slytherin. Still, Harry notices things. Snape's leg being injured after Halloween. Quirrell's nervous behavior. The way Dumbledore watches everyone with those twinkling eyes. Harry discusses his suspicions with Hermione and Ron. But he also does something original Harry couldn't. He writes to Lily and mentions his concerns in code, using references that only she would understand from conversations at Spinner's End. Lily, reading between the lines, recognizes that Harry is worried about something dangerous at Hogwarts. She writes back telling him to be careful, to tell a professor if he suspects something serious, but also trusting that she and Snape have taught him to handle difficult situations. She doesn't dismiss his concerns the way an adult might dismiss a child's worries. Harry's investigation into the stone is more calculated. He uses the library extensively, researching Nicholas Flamel with Hermione's help. He observes patterns in Quirrell and Snape's behavior. He notices when Snape starts acting even more protective than usual, though he doesn't understand why. The pieces come together slowly. Something valuable is hidden in the school. Snape is protecting it. Someone else is trying to steal it. And Dumbledore is allowing this situation to play out for reasons Harry can't quite grasp. The climax happens near the end of the school year, when Harry becomes convinced that someone is going to make their move for the stone. In this timeline, Harry doesn't rashly charge in immediately. Instead, he tells Hermione to find McGonagall or Dumbledore while he goes to intercept whoever is going after the stone. Hermione argues, wanting to come with him, but Harry points out that they need adults involved. It's a more mature decision than original timeline's children thinking they alone can handle it. Harry goes through the protections under the third-floor corridor, past Fluffy, through the Devil's Snare, catching the right key, surviving the chess game with strategic thinking rather than just bravery. But when he reaches the final chamber, what he finds is more complex than he expected. Quirrell is there, yes, unwrapping his turban to reveal Voldemort's face on the back of his head. But Snape arrives moments later, having figured out what Harry was doing and followed. The confrontation becomes three-way. Quirrell, Voldemort trying to get the stone, Snape trying to protect both the stone and Harry caught in the middle. Voldemort recognizes Harry, of course, the boy who lived, the child who destroyed his body. But Voldemort also recognizes Severus Snape, his former Death Eater who turned traitor for the love of a mudblood. His rage is palpable. Quirrell tries to grab Harry, to use him against Snape, but the moment Quirrell touches Harry's skin, the same protection that saved him as a baby activates. Quirrell's hands burn, he screams, and Voldemort's fury intensifies. Snape uses the distraction to hit Quirrell with a powerful curse, knocking him back, while Harry uses a levitation charm to send the stone flying across the room, away from Voldemort's reach. What follows is a desperate battle. Quirrell, possessed by Voldemort, is more powerful than he should be. Snape is excellent at defense, but he's also trying to keep Harry safe while fighting. Harry, 11 years old but better trained than most first years, does his best to help without getting killed. He uses transfiguration to create obstacles, levitation to move objects into Quirrell's path, anything to give Snape an advantage. When Quirrell lunges for Harry again, trying to use physical contact to force Harry to retrieve the stone, Harry deliberately grabs Quirrell's face with both hands, knowing the contact will hurt Quirrell more than it hurts him. The protection magic flares brilliantly. Quirrell screams, his skin burning and blistering where Harry touches him. Voldemort's rage is terrible, but he's weakening, the host body failing. Snape takes the opportunity to hit Quirrell with a stunning spell so powerful it throws him across the room. Quirrell's body convulses, and a shadow rises from him, formless and screaming with fury. It's Voldemort's spirit, too weak to maintain possession, forced out. The shadow rushes at Harry one last time, passing through him in a moment of terrible cold and pain, before fleeing through the walls, escaping to survive another day. Harry collapses, pain from his scar overwhelming him. Snape catches him before he hits the ground, his usual mask dropping to show genuine fear for his stepson's life. He's cradling Harry, checking him for injuries, when Dumbledore finally arrives with McGonagall and Hermione. The mirror of Erist is examined. The stone is retrieved from Harry's pocket where it appeared, and Quirrell's unconscious body is secured. Harry drifts in and out of consciousness, hearing voices but not quite processing them. He wakes in the hospital wing days later to find his mother sitting beside his bed. Lily flew to Hogwarts the moment she received word that Harry was injured, breaking through every protocol and security measure to reach her son. Her reunion with Harry is tearful and relieved. She's furious with Dumbledore for allowing such danger near students, furious with Harry for confronting it himself, and desperately grateful that he's alive. Snape is there too, standing slightly back. His expression carefully controlled, but his relief evident in the tension draining from his shoulders. The end of term plays out with significant changes from original timeline. Harry doesn't meet with Dumbledore alone. Lily insists on being present, and Snape joins them despite Dumbledore's initial objection. The conversation is tense. Dumbledore explains about the stone, about Voldemort's continued existence in spirit form, about his suspicions about Quirrell. But Lily isn't satisfied with these explanations. She demands to know why Dumbledore brought such a dangerous object into a school full of children, why he didn't simply destroy it or hide it somewhere else, why he seemed to allow events to unfold as a test for Harry. Dumbledore's answers are philosophical and somewhat evasive, talking about destiny and prophecy and the importance of Harry being tested. This enrages Lily, who argues that Harry is 11 years old and shouldn't be used as bait for Dark Lords. Snape supports her, though more coldly, pointing out that Harry could have died and taking house points from beyond the grave wouldn't help. Dumbledore looks older suddenly, acknowledging their concerns, but also suggesting that Harry showed remarkable courage and skill. He awards Slytherin house points for Harry's actions, which wins Slytherin the House Cup. But the victory feels hollow given what it cost. The Hogwarts Express ride home is subdued for Harry. He sits with Hermione and Ron, discussing everything that happened. Ron is amazed that Harry fought Voldemort and survived again. Hermione is concerned about the philosophical implications of Voldemort's spirit still being out there. Harry is just tired and wants to go home to Spinner's End, to his mum and Severus and the quiet normalcy of their strange little family. When the train reaches King's Cross, Lily and Snape are both waiting on the platform, and Harry has never been happier to see them. The summer after first year is different for this Harry. He's not trapped with the Dursleys, counting down days until he can return to Hogwarts. Instead, he's home where he wants to be, processing the trauma of facing Voldemort while surrounded by people who love him and understand. Lily insists Harry see a mind healer about what he experienced, something original Harry never had access to. Snape works with Harry on defensive magic, insisting that if Harry is going to keep getting into dangerous situations, he needs to be better prepared. They also spend time just being a family, visiting Sirius, going to Diagon Alley for books, enjoying quiet evenings at home. Second year begins with Harry being more aware of his fame and more uncomfortable with it. The Heir of Slytherin situation becomes incredibly complicated, given that Harry is actually in Slytherin house, when students start being petrified, and messages appear written in blood about the Chamber of Secrets being opened. Suspicion falls on Harry immediately. After all, he's the famous Slytherin who can apparently do anything. The whispers start. Maybe Harry Potter isn't as good as everyone thinks. Maybe he's the heir. Maybe being in Slytherin reveals his true nature. The discovery that Harry can speak Parseltongue, revealed during a dueling club session when he stops a snake from attacking Justin Finch Fletchley, makes everything worse. Parseltongue is associated with Slytherin, with dark wizards, with Voldemort himself. Students who were already suspicious of Harry now become afraid. Even some of his Slytherin housemates start avoiding him, uncertain what his abilities mean. Only Hermione, Ron, and a few close friends stand by him, insisting that speaking to snakes doesn't make someone evil. Harry is devastated by the accusations and fear. He goes to Snape, asking directly if being able to speak Parseltongue means he's evil or dark or connected to Voldemort in some terrible way. Snape's answer is characteristic, brutally honest but ultimately reassuring. He explains that Parseltongue is a rare ability often associated with dark wizards, but that abilities themselves are not good or evil, only how they're used. He also tells Harry something crucial. The night Voldemort tried to kill him, the night Harry got his scar, some form of connection was likely created. Parseltongue might be one manifestation of that connection. It doesn't make Harry evil. It makes him a survivor of a terrible attack who carries some scars, visible and invisible. This knowledge helps Harry cope, but the school's suspicion continues until the truth comes out. Ginny Weasley, possessed by Tom Riddle's diary, opens the Chamber of Secrets. Hermione is one of the students petrified while investigating. When Ginny is taken into the chamber, Ron comes to Harry for help, and together they inform McGonagall and Snape. This time, unlike original timeline, adults actually come with them into the chamber. Snape Lockhart, who's quickly revealed as a fraud, Harry and Ron descend together. When they reach the chamber itself and find Ginny unconscious with Tom Riddle's memory solidifying, the confrontation is different. Tom Riddle, the teenage version of Voldemort, reveals his plan as villains do. He's been draining Ginny's life to restore himself, using her to open the chamber and release the basilisk. But he's particularly interested in Harry. He senses the connection between them, the piece of his own soul that attached to Harry that night in Godric's Hollow, though he doesn't fully understand it yet. He taunts Harry about being in Slytherin, about being similar to him, and he completely dismisses Severus Snape as a former Death Eater who betrayed the cause for a mudblood. The battle against the basilisk is harrowing. Lockhart is useless and actually runs away. Ron is trying to keep Ginny safe while she's unconscious. Snape and Harry work together against the giant snake, with Fawkes the Phoenix arriving to help by blinding the basilisk. Harry still ends up stabbing the basilisk with Gryffindor's sword, which appears to him in his moment of need, proving that Slytherin sorting doesn't define his entire character. He also destroys Riddle's diary with the basilisk fang, accidentally destroying the Horcrux within, though no one understands the significance yet. When it's over, when Ginny wakes up and the truth comes out about the diary, several things are clear. Harry was never the heir of Slytherin. Harry is a hero who risked his life to save Ginny and stop the monster. And Harry is still fundamentally the same person regardless of his house or his abilities. The school's perception of him shifts again, though he's exhausted by the constant judgment. The one good thing that comes from the chamber incident is that Hermione, once recovered from being petrified, researches the connection between Harry and Voldemort extensively, beginning to understand that something very dark and complex ties them together. Third year brings its own complications with Sirius Black supposedly escaping Azkaban to kill Harry. Except in this timeline, Sirius never went to Azkaban, so the narrative is completely different. Instead, the threat comes from a different source, other escaped Death Eaters who have been biding their time. Peter Pettigrew, who was captured but managed to escape during a transfer, becomes the focal threat. He's desperate, cornered, and dangerous. He knows that Harry Potter represents everything he lost, and he wants revenge. The Dementors are still stationed around Hogwarts because of the escaped Death Eaters, and Harry still has a terrible reaction to them. His worst memories aren't of the Dursleys but of Godric's Hollow, of his father's death that he was too young to remember but somehow still affects him. Remus Lupin teaches defense against the dark arts that year and takes special interest in Harry, both as James's son and because he's aware of Harry's unique family situation. Remus teaches Harry the Patronus charm, and Harry's Patronus, when it finally appears, is a doe like his mother's, which surprises everyone who expected a stag like James. The climax of third year involves Peter Pettigrew trying to infiltrate Hogwarts in his rat form to attack Harry. The truth comes out. During a confrontation that involves Harry, Ron, who discovers his pet rat Scabbers is actually an animagus, Hermione, who researched the possibilities, Sirius, who's been hunting Pettigrew for years, Remus, who figures out what's happening, and Snape, who arrives to protect Harry. Pettigrew is captured properly this time, tried and sentenced to Azkaban where he belongs. It's a resolution that original timeline never quite achieved. Fourth year in the Triwizard Tournament. Present unique challenges for this. Harry, when his name comes out of the Goblet of Fire, despite him not entering, despite being underage, Harry's first instinct is to refuse. He's been raised to question things, to not blindly accept dangerous situations. But the magical contract forces his participation. Lily is furious with Dumbledore again, threatening to remove Harry from Hogwarts entirely if adequate protections aren't put in place. Snape is coldly calculating, already suspicious about who might have entered Harry's name and why. Harry approaches the tournament tasks strategically, using all his training. For the dragon task, he uses a combination of spells rather than just summoning his broom, demonstrating the advanced magical knowledge Snape and Lily have given him. For the second task in the lake, he's prepared multiple backup plans, having researched gillyweed but also bringing potions Snape helped him brew as alternatives. For the maze, he's cautious and methodical, watching for traps and helping other champions when possible, showing that Slytherin cunning doesn't preclude cooperation. The graveyard scene, when Harry and Cedric are portkeyed to Voldemort, is even more traumatic in this timeline because Harry has more to lose. He has a mother waiting for him, a stepfather who's taught him everything, friends and a life he values. When Cedric dies, when Harry is tied to that gravestone, when Voldemort uses Harry's blood to restore himself, Harry fights with desperate intensity. The priori incantatem still occurs. James's echo still appears to encourage Harry, but Lily's echo doesn't appear because she's not dead. It's a strange omission that Voldemort notices, confused about why Lily Potter's protection magic works on Harry if she's not dead. Harry escapes with Cedric's body, returns to Hogwarts, and the wizarding world must finally accept that Voldemort has returned. The Ministry's denial still happens, but it's harder to maintain with Harry's detailed account. With Snape's insider knowledge of Death Eater activity, and with Lily Potter publicly supporting her son's testimony, the political battle over Voldemort's return becomes more complicated because the Potter family has credibility that original Harry, an orphan, struggled to achieve. 5th year under Umbridge's control is nightmarish. Umbridge targets Harry specifically because he's the face of the Voldemort's return claims. But she also targets Snape because of his known connection to Harry and his suspected Death Eater past. The detentions where Umbridge makes Harry carve words into his own hand happen, but Harry tells Lily immediately. The resulting confrontation between Lily Potter and Dolores Umbridge is spectacular and nearly gets Lily banned from Hogwarts grounds. Snape has to restrain both his wife and his protective instincts, knowing that making an enemy of Umbridge will make things worse for Harry. The formation of Dumbledore's army happens similarly, with Harry teaching defensive magic to students who are being failed by Umbridge's theoretical-only curriculum. But this Harry is a better teacher than original timeline, having been trained by Snape and Lily in how to explain magical concepts clearly. The DA becomes more effective, learning at a faster pace. Harry teaches them everything he knows: defensive spells, strategic thinking, how to stay calm in dangerous situations, even some potion basics for combat situations. The Department of Mysteries battle is different because Harry has been taught not to rush into situations without planning. When he has visions of Sirius being tortured, he's suspicious rather than immediately reactive. He checks with the Order, he tries to verify, he plans. But Voldemort has accounted for Harry being more careful. The trap is more elaborate, forcing Harry's hand through threats against Hermione and Ron. The battle still happens, but Harry and his friends are better prepared. Having trained extensively in the DA, they hold their own longer against Death Eaters, though they're still ultimately children fighting adults. Sirius doesn't die at the Department of Mysteries in this timeline. He's wounded badly, but he survives because Harry's group holds the line better, because reinforcements arrive sooner. The prophecy is still destroyed, but Harry hears the full version from Dumbledore afterward. The revelation that either Harry must kill Voldemort or Voldemort must kill Harry is devastating, but Harry has Lily and Snape to help him process it. They don't dismiss his fear or his anger. They acknowledge the terribleness of the situation while also insisting that prophecies are not absolute, that choices matter more than fate. 6th year brings the revelation of Horcruxes. Dumbledore shares his research with Harry, explaining about the fragments of Voldemort's soul hidden in objects, making him nearly immortal. Harry processes this information and then does something original Harry couldn't. He tells Lily and Snape everything. They deserve to know what they're fighting, what threatens their family. The revelation is horrifying, but it also means Harry has help in hunting Horcruxes. Snape's knowledge of dark magic becomes invaluable in understanding how Horcruxes work and might be destroyed. The hunt for Horcruxes becomes a family project in a sense. Lily researches historical magic. Snape applies his understanding of dark artifacts. Harry contributes his unique connection to Voldemort, the visions and sensations that help locate the Horcruxes. They work together to find and destroy them: the ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem. Each destruction is dangerous and draining, but they're not alone in it. Hermione and Ron help, Sirius and Remus contribute, the Order of the Phoenix supports them. It's still a desperate hunt, but it's not 3 teenagers alone against impossible odds. The final complication is the realization that Harry himself is a Horcrux, that piece of Voldemort's soul that attached to him the night his father died. Dumbledore reveals this truth gently but firmly, For Voldemort to be truly defeated, for him to be mortal again, Harry must die. The soul fragment in his scar must be destroyed, and the only way to do that is for Voldemort to kill Harry. It's the cruelest truth imaginable, and it breaks something in all of them. Lily refuses to accept it, insisting there must be another way. Snape searches desperately for alternatives, applying all his knowledge of dark magic and soul magic. But the truth remains unavoidable. Harry makes the decision himself, ultimately. If his death means Voldemort can be defeated, if it means Lily and his friends and the entire wizarding world can be safe, then it's worth it. He's not happy about it. He's terrified, actually, but he's brave in the way his father was brave, making the choice to protect the people he loves. The parallel to James's sacrifice is intentional and heartbreaking. Like father, like son, both choosing to die so Lily and others might live. But there's a crucial difference in this timeline. When Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest to let Voldemort kill him, when he stands defenseless and accepts the killing curse, when he finds himself in that strange King's Cross limbo space talking to Dumbledore, the outcome is slightly different. The Horcrux is destroyed by Voldemort's curse, but Harry survives more definitively because Lily's protection is still active in a living form. Lily's love, her living presence in Harry's life, creates a tether to life that's even stronger than original timeline. Harry dies, but only briefly, and returns with the Horcrux destroyed and himself intact. The Battle of Hogwarts is still brutal and costly. People die. Friends fall. The castle is damaged. But Harry survives to duel Voldemort properly in front of everyone. Both of them finally mortal, finally on equal footing. When Harry's disarming charm meets Voldemort's killing curse and wins, when Voldemort's body hits the ground lifeless, it's not just Harry's victory. It's James's sacrifice finally avenged. It's Lily's love proven more powerful than any dark magic. It's Severus Snape's redemption completed. It's the end of a war that cost too much but was ultimately won. The aftermath of the Battle of Hogwarts shows just how profoundly different Harry's life has been, compared to what might have happened if he'd grown up abused and alone. When the dust settles and Voldemort's body lies on the floor of the Great Hall, when the survivors are counting their dead and tending their wounded, Harry doesn't collapse alone with the weight of what he's done. He has a family to return to, people who've been waiting in terror for him to survive this final confrontation. Lily finds him first, pushing through the crowds of survivors and casualties, her face streaked with tears and dirt and blood that isn't hers. She grabs Harry and holds him so tightly he can barely breathe, and he holds her back just as fiercely. She's checking him for injuries, her hands trembling as they move over his arms and face, making sure he's really alive, really whole. Harry tries to reassure her that he's fine, but his voice breaks on the words, because he's not fine, not really. He just killed a man, even if that man was Voldemort. He just watched friends die. He just came back from being dead himself, even if only briefly. Nothing about this is fine. Snape finds them next, moving through the chaos with his characteristic swift efficiency despite his own exhaustion. He doesn't say anything at first, just puts a hand on Harry's shoulder and squeezes once, hard. It's the most physical affection Snape usually shows in public, but Harry feels the relief and pride and fear in that single gesture. Snape has spent 17 years trying to protect Harry, first from guilt and then from genuine care, and seeing him alive after this final battle is a vindication of every choice he made since switching sides. Harry turns and embraces Snape properly, not caring who sees or what they think. Snape stiffens for just a moment, then returns the embrace with surprising strength. The three of them stand together in the ruined Great Hall, this strange family that trauma and choice created, and they're alive. All three of them made it through when so many didn't. The guilt of surviving when others fell is already creeping in around the edges of Harry's relief. But for now, he just holds on to his mother and his stepfather and lets himself feel safe for the first time in months. Hermione finds them soon after, Ron limping beside her, both of them battered but alive. The reunion is tearful and joyful and painful all at once. They've been through everything together. These three friends who fought side by side since they were 11 years old. Hermione throws herself at Harry, crying into his shoulder about how scared she was, how she thought he was dead when Voldemort carried him out of the forest. Ron grips Harry's arm hard enough to bruise, his usual joking demeanor completely absent. They're alive. They all made it. It doesn't feel real yet, The days immediately following the battle are a blur of funerals and memorials and grief that feels endless. They bury Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks, leaving their infant son Teddy an orphan. They bury Fred Weasley, the hole in the Weasley family, a wound that will never fully heal. They bury Colin Creevey, who was too young and too brave for his own good. They bury dozens more, names and faces that Harry knew, some well and some barely, but every single death feels like a personal failure. He survived, he won, and still all these people died. Harry's guilt is crushing in those first weeks. He walks through the damaged corridors of Hogwarts, helping with repairs and cleanup, and he can't stop seeing the faces of everyone who died. He wonders if there was something else he could have done, some other choice he could have made that would have saved more people. The logical part of his mind, the part trained by Snape to think strategically, knows that he did everything he could. But the emotional part, the part that's still just 18 years old and traumatized, can't accept that. Lily recognizes the signs of Harry spiraling into self-blame because she's intimately familiar with survivor's guilt herself. She survived Godric's Hollow when James didn't. She's carried that weight for 17 years. She sits with Harry in the Hogwarts grounds one evening, watching the sun set over the lake, and she tells him something she's never fully articulated before. Surviving when others die doesn't mean you didn't deserve to live. It doesn't mean you didn't do enough. It means you carry their memory forward and you live in a way that honors their sacrifice. You don't dishonor the dead by drowning in guilt. You dishonor them by wasting the life they died protecting. It's wisdom born from hard experience, and Harry listens. He doesn't magically feel better. That's not how grief and trauma work. But he begins to understand that healing is possible, even if it's not immediate. Lily insists that Harry see a mind healer, someone who specializes in treating war trauma. At first, Harry resists, falling into that typical masculine stoicism that says asking for help is weakness, but Lily shuts that down immediately. She tells him that Severus saw a mind healer for years after leaving the Death Eaters, that she herself has been in therapy since Godric's Hollow, that there's no shame in needing help to process impossible experiences. So Harry begins therapy, sitting in a quiet office in St. Mungo's once a week, talking about everything he's seen and done. He talks about watching Cedric die, about the graveyard where Voldemort returned, about being possessed by Voldemort in the Ministry, about Dumbledore's death even though it happened differently in this timeline, about walking into the forest to die, about the faces of everyone who fell in the final battle. His therapist, a kind older witch named Healer Aster, helps him develop tools for managing the nightmares and the flashbacks and the moments when he feels like he's back in the war even though it's over. The process is slow and non-linear. Some days Harry feels almost normal, laughing with friends and helping rebuild Hogwarts and planning for a future that seems possible. Other days he can barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by memories and loss. But he keeps going to therapy, keeps talking to Lily and Snape and his friends, keeps putting one foot in front of the other. It's what you do after trauma. You survive it, and then you survive the surviving. Hermione is dealing with her own trauma. The torture she endured at Malfoy Manor from Bellatrix Lestrange having left scars both visible and invisible. She and Harry spent a lot of time together that first year after the war, two people who understand what it's like to have nightmares about things that actually happened. Their relationship, which has always been close, deepens into something more during those months of mutual healing. It's not a fairy tale romance. It's two damaged people finding comfort and understanding in each other. They know each other's worst moments and darkest thoughts, and they choose each other anyway. Ron notices the shift between Harry and Hermione and, to his credit, handles it with more maturity than might be expected. He's dating Luna Lovegood by this point, having discovered that her particular brand of serene strangeness is exactly what he needs after the intensity of the war. The four of them spend time together often, rebuilding friendships and creating new memories that aren't stained by war and death. It's healing in its own way, reclaiming normalcy and youth that the war tried to steal from them. The wizarding world's reaction to Voldemort's defeat is complicated and messy in the way that real social change always is. There's jubilation, certainly, celebrations in the streets and parties that last for days. The Daily Prophet runs endless articles about Harry Potter, the boy who lived again, the Slytherin who proved that courage isn't house-specific, the young man who defeated the darkest wizard of the age. But there's also a reckoning that has to happen with how the war was allowed to occur in the first place, with the prejudice and corruption that enabled Voldemort's rise. Lily becomes a prominent voice in this reckoning. She's not just Harry Potter's mother anymore. She's a survivor, a researcher, a witch who has intimate experience with both sides of the blood purity. Debate having been a Muggle-born married into a pureblood family and then partnered with a former Death Eater, she writes articles and gives speeches and pushes for substantive reform in how Muggle-borns are treated in wizarding society. Her advocacy is sharp and uncompromising, informed by personal experience but elevated by her brilliant mind and her refusal to accept platitudes instead of action. She argues for better integration of Muggle-born students into Hogwarts, pointing out that expecting 11-year-olds from Muggle families to instantly adapt to a completely foreign culture with no support system is absurd and harmful. She pushes for changes in how magical history is taught, demanding that the contributions of Muggle-born wizards be properly acknowledged instead of minimized or ignored. She challenges the ministry's hiring practices that have historically favored pureblood families even when Muggle-born candidates are more qualified. She's relentless and effective, and she makes enemies among the old guard pureblood families who resent having their privilege questioned. Snape's role in the post-war wizarding world is equally complicated but in different ways. His status as a former Death Eater who became a spy is public knowledge now, revealed during Voldemort's trial in absentia after his death when all the evidence of the war was compiled. Some people see him as a hero who risked everything for years to bring down Voldemort from the inside. Others see him as a Death Eater who only switched sides for selfish reasons and doesn't deserve forgiveness regardless of what he did afterward. The truth, as usual, is more complex than either extreme. Snape doesn't defend himself publicly or seek redemption in the court of public opinion. He never has cared much what people think of him, a trait that served him well as a spy and serves him still in the aftermath. He simply continues his work, teaching potions at Hogwarts with his characteristic exacting standards, contributing his extensive knowledge of dark magic to the Ministry's efforts to round up remaining Death Eaters and dismantle dark artifacts, and supporting Lily's reform efforts in quieter, more behind-the-scenes ways. He's not interested in being celebrated as a hero. He's interested in building a world where the next generation of students won't have to fight the war his generation did. One of the most significant changes Snape pushes for, somewhat surprisingly, is reform of Slytherin House itself. He argues that the house's reputation as a breeding ground for dark wizards is a self-fulfilling prophecy. When students are sorted into Slytherin and immediately treated with suspicion and hostility by the other houses and even some teachers, when they're told implicitly and explicitly that they're destined to become dark wizards because of their ambition and cunning, is it any wonder that some of them fulfill those expectations? Snape advocates for actively working to change Slytherin's culture, to emphasize the positive aspects of ambition and resourcefulness, while challenging the blood purity ideology that has poisoned the house for generations. Harry becomes the face of this new vision for Slytherin, whether he wants to be or not. He's living proof that you can be sorted into Slytherin and still be brave, still be good, still choose to fight for what's right even when it's hard. His fame, which he's always found burdensome, becomes useful for this specific purpose. When young students write to him asking if being sorted into Slytherin means they're bad, he writes back every time, patiently explaining that your house doesn't define you, that he was in Slytherin and he's proud of it. That cunning and ambition are only as good or bad as what you choose to do with them. The rebuilding of Hogwarts takes months of intensive work from hundreds of people. The battle left significant damage, both structural and metaphorical. Walls need to be repaired, windows replaced, bloodstains vanished from stone floors. But there's also a sense that Hogwarts needs to be rebuilt philosophically, that the castle has been the center of too much trauma and too many battles. There's debate about whether to even reopen the school, whether it's appropriate to continue educating children in a place where so many died. Ultimately, McGonagall, who has taken over as headmistress after Dumbledore's death some years earlier in this timeline, decides that Hogwarts must reopen. Closing the school would be letting Voldemort win in a different way, letting fear and trauma define the future. But the school that reopens in September after Voldemort's defeat is not quite the same Hogwarts that closed. There are new protections, new protocols for student safety, new classes focused on processing trauma and teaching conflict resolution. There's a memorial garden where students can go to remember those who died, with stones bearing the names of everyone from the battle and from the wider war. Harry is invited to speak at the reopening ceremony, an honor he accepts with great reluctance. He's never been comfortable with public speaking or being in the spotlight, preferring to work behind the scenes. But he recognizes that his words might matter to the students who are nervous about returning to a school where a battle was fought, to the first years who are coming to Hogwarts for the first time knowing its recent history. So he stands in front of the assembled school, all 4 houses together in the Great Hall, and he speaks from the heart about fear and courage and choosing to move forward even when you're scared. He tells them that Hogwarts has always been a place of learning. But that learning doesn't just mean academics. You learn who you are at Hogwarts. You learn what you value, what you'll fight for, who you want to become. The war tested everyone in terrible ways, but it also revealed the best in so many people. Students protected each other across house lines. Teachers sacrificed themselves for students. The castle itself seemed to fight alongside them against Voldemort's forces. Hogwarts is more than just a school. It's a community, and communities heal by supporting each other and remembering both the good and the bad of their history. He encourages the students to make new memories in these ancient halls, to reclaim the castle from the shadow of war, to build the future that so many people died protecting. The speech is well received, though Harry is uncomfortable with the applause and attention it generates. What matters more to him are the letters he receives in the weeks following, from students thanking him for his words, from parents expressing gratitude that their children have a school to return to, from teachers acknowledging the difficulty of moving forward while honoring the past. He keeps these letters in a box in his room at Spinner's End, reading them sometimes when the nightmares are bad, and he needs to remember why the war was worth fighting. As the months pass and the immediate aftermath of the war begins to fade into history, Harry has to make decisions about his own future. He's 18 years old, technically an adult in the wizarding world, but he feels simultaneously much older and much younger than that. He missed his 7th year at Hogwarts because of the war and the Horcrux hunt, but McGonagall offers him and other students in his situation the chance to return and complete their education. Some students take her up on the offer. Hermione does, eager to properly complete her schooling and take her newts. Ron decides not to, wanting to move forward rather than backward, and accepts a position training as an Auror. Harry is torn. Part of him wants the normalcy of returning to Hogwarts, of having a routine and structure and clear goals. But another part of him feels like he can't go back. That too much has happened and changed for him to sit in classes learning theory when he's already faced practical application in the most extreme circumstances possible. He talks it over with Lily and Snape during a long evening at Spinner's End, weighing his options and trying to figure out what he actually wants versus what he thinks he should want. Snape, in his typically direct way, tells Harry that education isn't just about completing credentials. Harry has already received an education in practical magic that exceeds what most 7th years learn. What he needs now is time to process and heal, and if that means not returning to Hogwarts as a student, that's a valid choice. Lily counters that having structure and goals can be helpful for processing trauma, that returning to school might provide a sense of normalcy that could be healing in its own way. They both make good points, as they usually do, and ultimately they tell Harry to make whatever decision feels right for him, rather than what he thinks other people expect. Harry decides not to return to Hogwarts as a student. Instead, he takes a year to just exist, to heal, to figure out who he is when he's not actively fighting for survival. He lives at Spinner's End with Lily and Snape, though Snape is often at Hogwarts during the week. He spends his days reading, both magical texts and Muggle literature, exploring subjects that interest him without the pressure of exams or grades. He helps Lily with her research into protective magic, learning advanced theory and experimental spellcrafting. He practices magic for the pleasure of it rather than for combat readiness, relearning how to find joy in transfiguration and charms without thinking about how they could be weaponized. He also spends significant time with Teddy Lupin, his godson, the orphaned infant son of Remus and Tonks. Teddy's grandmother Andromeda is raising him, but Harry visits often, feeling a deep responsibility to this child who lost both parents in the war. He tells Teddy stories about Remus and Tonks even though Teddy is too young to understand. He helps with bottles and nappies and midnight crying sessions. He watches Teddy's hair change color with his moods, a metamorph magus like his mother, and he feels the weight of making sure this child grows up knowing he was loved and his parents were heroes. There's something healing about spending time with Teddy, about being involved in creating a childhood for someone else that's full of love and security. Harry finds himself thinking often about his own childhood in this timeline, about how different it was from what it could have been. He grew up at Spinner's End with Lily and Severus, in a house that wasn't fancy but was always safe, with adults who had their own damage but who loved him fiercely. He grew up knowing magic, understanding the wizarding world, being prepared for the challenges he would face. Teddy will have that too, Harry determines. He'll grow up knowing the truth about his parents, about the war, about the world. But he'll also grow up protected and loved and given every chance to just be a child. Harry's relationship with Hermione continues to deepen during that year of healing. They've always understood each other in fundamental ways, both of them valuing knowledge and strategic thinking, both of them carrying the weight of responsibility seriously. But after the war, they connect on an even deeper level, both of them processing similar trauma, both of them trying to figure out who they are when they're not defined by the war. They spend hours talking about everything and nothing, from magical theory to philosophy to their fears about the future. They take long walks through Muggle London, finding comfort in anonymity among people who don't know or care about the boy who lived. Their relationship transitions from friendship to romance gradually and naturally. There's no dramatic moment of realization, no grand gesture or passionate declaration. It's more like they wake up one day and realize that what they have is partnership and love, and a deep abiding trust that will sustain them through whatever comes next. They don't rush into anything, having learned the hard way that life is too short and too precious to waste on things that don't matter, but too long and too fragile to rush through the moments that do. When Harry proposes to Hermione, it's quiet and private. Just the two of them in the library at Spinner's End, surrounded by books and the soft light of a winter afternoon. He doesn't have a prepared speech. He just tells her that he can't imagine a future without her in it, that she makes him better and braver and more whole, that he wants to build a life together if she does. Hermione cries and laughs and says yes, and they sit together making plans for a wedding that will be small and intimate, just family and close friends. Nothing like the media circus that Harry's fame would attract if they made it a public event. Lily is overjoyed when they tell her about the engagement. She's watched Harry and Hermione's relationship develop and has seen how good they are for each other, how they balance and support one another. She immediately starts planning, trying to respect their wish for a small wedding while also wanting to make it special. Snape's reaction is more measured but no less pleased. He's developed a respect for Hermione over the years, particularly after she brewed Polyjuice Potion in her second year, a 7th year level potion, and after she mastered Felix Felicis in 6th year on her first attempt. He tells Harry privately that Hermione is perhaps the only person he knows who is stubborn and brilliant enough to keep Harry from doing anything too recklessly heroic in the future, which is Snape's way of saying he approves. The wedding takes place in late summer, a year and a half after Voldemort's defeat. It's held in the garden behind Spinner's End, which Snape has cultivated over the years into a surprisingly beautiful space full of potion ingredients and magical plants. The guest list is small: the Weasleys, Luna, Neville, other DA members who became close friends during the war, McGonagall, representing Hogwarts, Sirius, who walks Hermione down the aisle since her parents are still in Australia with modified memories, a situation Hermione is still working to reverse. Andromeda brings Teddy, who's now a toddler and who tries to eat the flowers in his role as ring-bearer. The ceremony is performed by a ministry official, a simple magical bonding that ties their lives and magic together in the way wizarding marriages do. Harry makes his vows looking into Hermione's eyes, promising to love her and challenge her and stand beside her in whatever comes next, promising to build a life that's about more than just surviving. Hermione's vows are characteristically eloquent and detailed, covering everything from intellectual partnership to emotional support to sharing the household potion brewing duties. There's laughter and tears from the assembled guests, and when they're pronounced married and kiss, there's a feeling of hope and new beginnings that's been rare in recent years. The reception is held in the same garden, with magically enhanced lighting and music and food that Mrs. Weasley insisted on preparing despite Lily's protests that she could handle catering. People eat and drink and dance and tell stories, celebrating not just the wedding but the fact that they're all alive to celebrate it. Sirius gets drunk and gives a rambling toast about how James would have loved Hermione and approved of the match, which makes Harry emotional. Snape makes a brief dry toast about how at least now Hermione can legally prevent Harry from doing anything too stupid, which makes everyone laugh. Ron, slightly drunk himself, gives a surprisingly heartfelt toast about how Harry and Hermione are the best people he knows, and he's honored to call them family. Harry and Hermione's honeymoon is spent in Scotland, in a small cottage near a loch, far from people and attention and responsibilities. They spend 2 weeks just being together, reading and talking and hiking through the Highlands and making love in a comfortable bed, without worrying about anyone walking in or any dark lords attacking. It's the most peaceful 2 weeks Harry has had in his entire life, and he treasures every moment of it. When they return to reality, tanned and rested and happy, they're ready to start making decisions about their future together. The question of what Harry will do with his life is one that's been simmering throughout his year of recovery. He's now 19, married, and technically unemployed. He has fame and money, the Potter family vault having been substantial even before the rewards and compensations that were offered after the war. He could live comfortably without working if he wanted to. But that's never been who Harry is. He needs purpose, needs to feel like he's contributing something meaningful. The question is what that contribution should be. The obvious path, and the one that many people assume he'll take, is becoming an Auror. He's been fighting dark wizards since he was 11. He's brilliant at defense against the dark arts. He has practical combat experience that exceeds most trained Aurors. Ron has already joined the Auror training program and regularly encourages Harry to apply. The Ministry would fast-track his application in a heartbeat. Having Harry Potter as an Auror would be a massive public relations boost for them. But Harry is hesitant about becoming an Auror for several reasons. First, he's tired of fighting. He's spent 7 years of his life in various states of combat readiness, and the idea of making a career out of hunting dark wizards doesn't appeal the way it might have before he actually experienced war. Second, he's wary of the Ministry and its politics, having seen how easily it was corrupted and how willing it was to deny Voldemort's return for political convenience. He doesn't want to be a tool of political machinations. Third, and perhaps most honestly, he's worried about what making a career out of violence would do to him psychologically. He's already dealing with trauma from the war. Actively seeking out more conflict seems counterproductive to healing. Teaching is another option that multiple people suggest. McGonagall has made it clear that Harry would be welcome to apply for the Defense Against the Dark Arts position at Hogwarts whenever he's ready. He's certainly qualified, having practical experience and a talent for explaining complex concepts, as demonstrated during his leadership of the DA. Hermione strongly encourages this path, pointing out that teaching would allow him to pass on what he learned while also working through his own experiences by helping the next generation. And there's undeniable appeal in the idea of returning to Hogwarts as a professor, of helping students learn to defend themselves so they don't have to go through what his generation did. But Harry isn't sure he's ready for teaching yet. He's only 19, barely older than the 7th-year students he would be teaching. He's still processing his own trauma and doesn't know if he has the emotional bandwidth to handle students' questions and needs while managing his own healing. And there's a part of him that worries about being at Hogwarts, about walking those halls every day and being constantly reminded of the battle, of everyone who died there. He needs more distance, more time before he can return to the castle as anything other than a visitor. Research is the third major option, and it's the one that ultimately calls to Harry most strongly. He's been helping Lily with her work on protective magic, and he's discovered that he has a genuine talent and passion for experimental spellcrafting. His unique experiences, particularly with the protective magic that saved him from Voldemort twice, give him insights that few other researchers have. And research would allow him to contribute meaningfully to the wizarding world's safety without requiring him to personally engage in violence or confront his trauma before he's ready. Harry applies for a research position with the Department of Mysteries, specifically in the section that studies protective and defensive magic. The application process is rigorous, requiring detailed proposals and interviews and demonstrations of magical theory. But Harry's combination of practical experience, theoretical knowledge from Snape and Lily's teaching, and unique personal insight into how protective magic works makes him an ideal candidate. He's accepted into the program, starting as a junior researcher working under more experienced scholars while developing his own projects. The work is challenging and fulfilling in ways that Harry didn't expect. He spends his days reading ancient texts about magical protection, conducting carefully controlled experiments with different spell matrices, collaborating with other researchers to develop new defensive magic that could protect against dark curses. It's intellectual work that requires precision and creativity, and Harry discovers that he's good at it. The strategic thinking that Snape cultivated in him translates well to research, where you have to anticipate variables and plan for multiple outcomes. The theoretical foundation that Lily built in him allows him to understand complex magical concepts and build on them innovatively. One of Harry's primary research projects focuses on developing a more accessible version of the Patronus charm. The traditional Patronus is powerful but difficult, requiring intense emotional focus and positive memories that many people struggle to achieve, especially in moments of actual danger from Dementors or other dark creatures. Harry's research explores whether the protective mechanics of the Patronus could be simplified or adapted into a charm that more wizards could reliably cast. It's ambitious work that draws on his own experience producing a corporeal Patronus at age 13, which was remarkably young for such advanced magic. The research requires him to work closely with Dementors in controlled settings, which is psychologically difficult given his strong reaction to them, but it also forces him to confront his trauma in a structured, therapeutic way. He works with his mind healer to develop coping strategies for managing his response to Dementors while still conducting the necessary research. Slowly, painfully, he builds up tolerance and understanding. He learns to produce his Patronus, not despite the bad memories, but while acknowledging them, integrating his trauma into his magical practice rather than trying to suppress it. Hermione, meanwhile, has completed her 7th year at Hogwarts and taken her newts with predictably outstanding results. She's offered positions at both the Ministry and St. Mungo's, but she chooses to work for the Ministry in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. It's not the most prestigious department, and many people are confused by her choice. But Hermione has always been driven by a desire to improve conditions for marginalized beings, and she sees the treatment of house elves, centaurs, werewolves, and other magical creatures as a fundamental justice issue that the wizarding world has ignored for too long. She starts by working on legislation to grant house elves more rights and protections, building on the work she started with Spew as a student, but with more sophistication and political savvy. She faces enormous resistance from pure-blood families who rely on house elf labor and see any change as threatening their lifestyle. But Hermione is relentless, marshalling evidence and arguments and slowly building coalitions with more progressive ministry officials. She works closely with Lily, whose advocacy for Muggle-born rights has given her significant political influence, to push through reforms that at least begin to address the worst abuses of the house elf system. Harry and Hermione's life together in these early years of marriage is busy but fulfilling. They buy a small house in Godric's Hollow, which is symbolic in multiple ways. It's where Harry was born, where James died, where Lily was attacked. Returning there to build a new life, to create happy memories in a place marked by tragedy, feels like reclaiming something important. The house isn't the Potter cottage that was destroyed and later turned into a memorial. Instead, they buy a different house in the village, modest but comfortable, with room for Harry's research library and Hermione's ever-expanding book collection, and eventually, they hope, children. They settle into a routine of domestic life that feels miraculously normal after years of war and chaos. They both work demanding jobs that they're passionate about. They come home in the evenings and cook dinner together, arguing about potion techniques or debating magical theory while they chop vegetables. They spend weekends with friends and family, visiting Spinner's End or the Burrow or having people over to their house. They read together in comfortable silence, two bodies on the same couch absorbed in different books, occasionally reading passages aloud to each other when they find something particularly interesting. Of course, life isn't perfectly tranquil. Harry still has nightmares regularly, waking, gasping, and disoriented from dreams of the graveyard or the forest or the battle. Hermione has her own demons, flinching from sudden movements and struggling with crowds because of her trauma from Malfoy Manor. They both have days when the weight of what they survived feels crushing, when getting out of bed requires heroic effort, but they support each other through it. Talking when talking helps and providing silent presence when words aren't enough. They're building a life together not despite their trauma, but while actively working through it, understanding that healing isn't linear, but it is possible. Harry's relationship with his family remains central to his life, even as he builds his own household with Hermione. He visits Spinner's End regularly, having dinner with Lily and Snape and catching them up on his research. Lily is his primary consultant for experimental work, her expertise and charms making her invaluable for providing feedback on his spell development. Snape, though no longer teaching Harry directly, still critiques his potion work with the same exacting standards he always has. It's their way of showing love, this continued investment in Harry's magical education and development. The relationship between Harry and Snape has evolved into something neither of them quite expected. They're not demonstrative with affection. That's not Snape's way, and Harry has adapted to it. But there's a deep mutual respect and care that doesn't require constant verbal affirmation. Snape still criticizes Harry's work, but the criticism is constructive and given with the expectation that Harry will rise to meet higher standards. Harry still occasionally rebels against Snape's severity, but he also recognizes it as a form of caring, a refusal to accept less than Harry's best. They're family in the truest sense, bound not by blood, but by choice and years of shared life. Lily thrives in the post-war years in ways that are beautiful to watch. She's always been brilliant and capable. But for 17 years, she was primarily focused on survival and protecting Harry. Now, with the threat of Voldemort finally gone, she can pursue her own goals and passions fully. Her research into protective magic becomes groundbreaking, with several of her papers being published in prestigious journals and her techniques being adopted by the Ministry for Protective Wards. Her advocacy work continues to push the wizarding world toward more progressive attitudes about blood status and Muggle-born rights. She's becoming a significant figure in her own right, not just as Harry Potter's mother, but as Lily Potter, researcher and reformer. Her relationship with Severus continues to be one of the most unexpected love stories in the wizarding world. They married out of necessity initially, to legally bind Snape to Harry for protection purposes. But over the years, genuine partnership and love grew between them. It's not a fairy tale romance. They argue frequently, both of them too intelligent and stubborn to simply agree with each other, but they respect each other deeply, complementing each other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. Severus grounds Lily's idealism with pragmatic concerns. Lily softens Severus's cynicism with her persistent hope. Together, they're formidable. Snape's position at Hogwarts grows more secure in the post-war years. He's initially just the potions master again after the war, but when McGonagall decides to retire a few years later, she recommends Snape for the position of headmaster. It's controversial. There are many who still see him as a former Death Eater regardless of his work as a spy, but McGonagall argues forcefully that Snape understands the complexities of choice and redemption better than anyone, that he's uniquely qualified to guide Hogwarts into a future that learns from the past without being paralyzed by it. Snape accepts the position with his characteristic lack of enthusiasm, making it clear that he's doing this because someone competent needs to run the school, not because he has any particular desire for the title or prestige. As headmaster, he's strict and demanding and utterly uninterested in being popular. But he's also scrupulously fair in ways that previous headmasters weren't always. He refuses to tolerate bullying between houses, coming down hard on any student who harasses others for their blood status or house affiliation. He personally mentors struggling students, particularly those from Slytherin who are dealing with the stigma of their house's reputation. He implements reforms to house point systems and disciplinary procedures to reduce bias and create more equity. Under Snape's leadership, Hogwarts begins to genuinely change its culture. The inter-house rivalry that historically bordered on hostility is gradually replaced with competition that's spirited but not vicious. Students from different houses work together more often, particularly in the revised Defense Against the Dark Arts curriculum that emphasizes practical cooperation. The number of Slytherin students who go on to become productive members of wizarding society rather than drifting toward dark magic increases notably. It's slow progress. Cultural change always is, but it's real and meaningful. Harry eventually returns to Hogwarts, not as a student but as an instructor when he's 25 years old. McGonagall, who stayed on as deputy headmistress after Snape became headmaster, approaches him about teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts. Harry has been considering the possibility for a while. His research work has been successful, but he's been feeling increasingly drawn to teaching, to passing on what he learned to the next generation. Hermione has been encouraging him, pointing out that he has the maturity and emotional processing now that he lacked at 19. And Snape, in his straightforward way, tells Harry that the school needs a defense teacher who actually knows how to defend against dark magic rather than just theory. And Harry is the most qualified person in Britain for that position. So Harry accepts, becoming Professor Potter at age 25. His first year teaching is challenging in ways he didn't fully anticipate. Standing in front of a classroom of students, many of whom look at him with awe or fear or excessive curiosity because of his fame, requires a different kind of courage than facing dark wizards. He has to learn how to manage a classroom, how to pace lessons, how to discipline students without being too harsh or too lenient. He has to figure out how to teach students with vastly different skill levels and learning styles. He has to balance preparing students for real dangers with not terrifying them with stories from the war. But he's good at it, discovering a talent for teaching that combines his mother's patience with his stepfather's high standards. He's demanding but supportive, pushing students to exceed what they think they're capable of, while also providing the scaffolding and encouragement they need to succeed. He teaches practical defense heavily, having students practice actual spells and counter curses rather than just reading about them. He brings in guest speakers including aurors, healers, and other professionals who can discuss real-world applications of defensive magic. He creates scenarios and simulations where students have to think strategically about defense, making decisions under pressure. He's particularly attentive to students who show signs of trauma or anxiety, remembering his own struggles. He makes it clear that his office is always open if students need to talk, and he follows through on that promise, spending many evenings listening to students discuss their fears about dark magic or their nightmares about the war that happened when they were children, or their concerns about family members who were Death Eaters. He can't solve all their problems, but he can listen and offer perspective from someone who survived the worst the dark side had to offer and came out the other side. Teaching at Hogwarts while Snape is headmaster creates interesting dynamics. Snape is scrupulously professional, never showing favoritism toward Harry or treating him differently than other professors. If anything, he's slightly harder on Harry, questioning his curriculum choices and demanding detailed lesson plans and holding him to extremely high standards. But Harry understands this is Snape's way of ensuring that no one can accuse Harry of getting special treatment because of their relationship. In private, in the headmaster's office, or during visits to Spinner's End, Snape expresses pride in Harry's teaching and satisfaction that Hogwarts students are finally learning proper defense. Harry and Hermione's decision to start a family comes after several years of marriage, when they're both established in their careers and feeling stable enough to take on the responsibility of children. The process is nerve-wracking for both of them, bringing up all their anxieties about being good parents, about raising children in a world that's safer than it was but still has dangers. Harry worries about passing on his trauma, about being too protective or not protective enough, about whether children will be safe given his fame and history. Hermione worries about balancing career and motherhood, about being a good example, about raising children who are kind and smart and happy. But when their first child is born, a son they named James Sirius Potter after the two men who were so important to Harry's life, all their anxieties are temporarily overwhelmed by love and terror in equal measure. Harry holds his son for the first time and understands viscerally what James Potter felt, why he was willing to die to protect his family. The love is instantaneous and overwhelming. The fear is equally powerful, the awareness of how fragile this tiny person is, how many things could hurt him. But there's also joy, pure and uncomplicated, at this new life they created together. Lily is overjoyed to be a grandmother, though she insists that little James call her Lily rather than Grandma, because she's far too young for that. She's actively involved in her grandson's life, babysitting regularly, teaching him little bits of magic as he grows, telling him stories about his grandfather James and the Marauders. Snape's reaction to becoming a grandfather figure is characteristically reserved, but no less meaningful. He's awkward with babies initially, but as James grows into a toddler and starts showing magical ability and curiosity, Snape engages with him more, teaching him about potion ingredients and answering his endless questions with actual explanations rather than dismissals. Harry and Hermione have two more children over the following years. A daughter named Lily Luna Potter after Harry's mother and Luna Lovegood, who has become a close family friend, and another son named Severus Remus Potter, after the two complicated men who shaped Harry's understanding of redemption and choice. The decision to name a child after Severus Snape is one that Harry discusses extensively with Hermione, aware of how meaningful and overwhelming it will be for Snape. When they tell Snape about the name, he's visibly affected, more emotion showing on his face than Harry has seen in years. He doesn't say much, just a quiet thank you. But Harry sees him later that evening in conversation with Lily, and there are tears on Snape's face. The Potter children grow up in a very different environment than Harry did, either in the original timeline or even in this alternate one. They grow up in a time of peace, in a world that's actively working to be better, with parents who are present and loving and committed to giving them happy childhoods. They grow up knowing they're loved unconditionally, never having to earn affection or fear abandonment. They grow up with extended family, including Grandma Lily and Grandpa Severus, honorary grandparents in Sirius and Andromeda, aunts and uncles in the Weasleys and other war survivors, and an entire community of people invested in their well-being. But they also grow up with the weight of their family history. They know their father is famous, though Harry tries to downplay it and keep them grounded. They know about the war, about Voldemort, about all the people who died so they could grow up in peace. Harry and Hermione are honest with their children about the darkness in the world, believing that knowledge and preparation are better than naive innocence. But they balance that honesty with age-appropriate boundaries, not burdening young children with adult trauma while still teaching them to be aware and thoughtful. The Potter children are raised with values that reflect both Harry and Hermione's priorities and the lessons learned from the war. They're taught that blood status is meaningless, that what matters is character and choice. They're taught to question authority respectfully but firmly, to think critically about rules and traditions rather than accepting them blindly. They're taught that courage means doing what's right even when it's hard, but that asking for help isn't weakness. They're taught that learning is lifelong, that intellectual curiosity is a virtue, that knowledge is power, but wisdom is knowing how to use that power responsibly. James, Lily, and Severus grow up close to Teddy Lupin, who is several years older, but who Harry and Hermione have been actively involved with throughout his childhood. Teddy is like an older brother to the Potter children, babysitting them, teaching them things, and serving as a bridge between the generation that fought the war and the generation born after it. Teddy grows up with stories about his parents from Harry and others who knew Remus and Tonks, and he carries that legacy with pride and grief. He becomes an Auror eventually, wanting to fight for the peace his parents died creating. As Harry's children grow and prepare to go to Hogwarts themselves, the cycle continues in new form. James Sirius is sorted into Gryffindor, following his grandfather rather than his father, and becomes a mischievous student who constantly tests boundaries. Lily Luna is sorted into Ravenclaw, her love of learning and curiosity making her a natural fit. Severus Remus, when his turn comes, is sorted into Slytherin like Harry, and Harry makes sure his son knows that's something to be proud of, that Slytherin has produced brilliant and good wizards, including his namesake grandfather. Harry continues teaching at Hogwarts through his children's school years, which creates interesting dynamics. He's known as a fair but demanding professor, and students know better than to try to use a connection to his children to curry favor. He's careful about maintaining boundaries, not giving his own children special treatment, but also not being harder on them to compensate. It's a delicate balance, but he manages it with the same careful consideration he applies to all his teaching. The years pass, and the generation that fought against Voldemort moves into middle age and beyond. The war becomes history, something that happened rather than something currently happening, though its effects ripple forward. The reforms that Lily and others pushed for take root, slowly changing Wizarding Society's attitudes toward blood status and creature rights. The educational changes at Hogwarts under Snape's leadership create a generation of students who are more thoughtful and less prejudiced than their predecessors. The research that Harry and others conduct leads to new defensive magic that makes the wizarding world genuinely safer. There are setbacks, of course. Social change is never linear or easy. There are still bigots who resist reform, still dark wizards who must be stopped, still injustices that need fighting. But the overall trajectory is positive in ways it wasn't before. The world that Harry's children inherit is measurably better than the one Harry grew up in, and that feels like a worthy legacy. Harry's relationship with Severus Snape evolves throughout his adult life in ways that continue to surprise him. As Harry matures and has children of his own, he understands more fully the choices Snape made, the risks he took, the daily work of raising a child and teaching students and trying to make the world slightly better. They have conversations now that they couldn't have had when Harry was younger, discussions about morality and redemption and the weight of past choices. Snape, in his 70s and 80s, mellows slightly, becoming marginally less severe, though never losing his sharp tongue or high standards. When Snape eventually retires as headmaster in his late 80s, it's a significant moment for the entire wizarding world. He's been an influential figure in magical education for over 60 years, first as potions master, then as headmaster. His tenure reshaped Hogwarts in fundamental ways, breaking down some of the worst aspects of house rivalry and creating space for students from all backgrounds to succeed. His retirement ceremony is well attended, despite his grumbling that such fuss is unnecessary. Harry speaks at the ceremony, talking about what Snape meant to him personally and professionally, about how Snape taught him that people are defined not by their worst moments, but by their sustained choices to do better. After retirement, Snape and Lily finally get to just be together without the weight of responsibilities. They travel, visiting magical sites around the world that Snape always wanted to research and Lily always wanted to explore. They spend time at Spinner's End, which has been expanded and renovated over the years into a comfortable home filled with books and potion ingredients and memories. They're surrounded by family, including Harry and his children, all of whom visit regularly and make the house loud with life and laughter. Lily's health begins to decline first. The magical injuries she sustained at Godric's Hollow all those years ago finally catching up with her in her 80s. Harry spends as much time with her as possible, knowing that this time is precious and limited. They talk about everything: his childhood, her choices, James's sacrifice, Severus's redemption, Harry's own children, the state of the wizarding world. Lily tells Harry that she's proud of him, not just for defeating Voldemort or becoming a professor or raising good children, but for being fundamentally kind and decent despite everything he went through. It's the validation Harry didn't realize he still needed, and it matters more than any fame or recognition ever did. When Lily passes away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family, the grief is profound but also touched with gratitude. She lived a full life, far longer and richer than it would have been if Voldemort had killed her at 21. She got to raise her son, see him marry and have children, contribute meaningfully to reforming wizarding society, find unexpected love with Severus, and live to see peace firmly established. Her funeral is attended by hundreds of people whose lives she touched through her research, her advocacy, her teaching, or her simple kindness. Harry eulogizes his mother, talking about her strength and intelligence and capacity for love, and there's not a dry eye in attendance. Snape retreats into himself after Lily's death, the loss of his wife and partner of over 50 years hitting him harder than he shows publicly. Harry visits him almost daily, bringing his children, sitting in companionable silence or talking about Lily or just being present. Snape, who has spent a lifetime being closed off emotionally, opens up more in his grief, sharing stories about Lily that Harry never heard, talking about their years together, expressing his gratitude for the life they built from the ruins of war and bad choices. Snape lives another 5 years after Lily's death, gradually fading but remaining sharp-minded to the end. He uses that time to compile his extensive knowledge of potions into comprehensive texts that will benefit students for generations. He continues to critique Harry's teaching from retirement, reading his son's lesson plans and offering suggestions because that's his way of showing love. He spends time with his grandchildren, teaching them advanced magic and telling them stories about their parents and grandparents and the complicated history that shaped their family. When Snape dies in his sleep at 93, it's peaceful and expected, but the loss is still devastating. Harry organizes Snape's funeral with Hermione's help, determined to give Severus the recognition he deserves but didn't seek in life. The ceremony acknowledges all of Snape's complexity: his early choices that led him to the Death Eaters, his decision to switch sides out of love, his years as a spy risking everything, his role in raising Harry and reshaping Hogwarts, his contributions to potions and defense against the dark arts, his partnership with Lily. Harry speaks at the funeral, and his eulogy is a masterpiece of honesty and love, acknowledging Snape's flaws while celebrating his remarkable capacity for change and his fundamental goodness despite his severe exterior. The Wizarding World's reaction to Snape's death demonstrates how thoroughly his legacy has been rehabilitated. Students who studied under him share stories about his demanding but fair teaching. Colleagues discuss his brilliance at potions and his strategic mind. Ministry officials acknowledge his role in winning the war. Ordinary witches and wizards who never met him express gratitude for his sacrifice and service. The boy who joined Death Eaters out of anger and desperation, who betrayed Voldemort out of love, who spent decades protecting and teaching children, is remembered as a hero and a complex human whose story embodies the possibility of redemption. Harry inherits Spinner's End, the small house in Cokeworth where he was raised. He keeps it as a family home rather than selling it, preserving the space where his childhood happened and where 3 damaged people became a family. He brings his own children there, showing them the basement laboratory where he learned potions, the library where he studied magical theory, the garden where Snape grew ingredients and Lily tended flowers, the living room where they argued and laughed and built a life together. It's important to Harry that his children understand their history, that they know the full, complicated story of how they came to exist. As Harry grows older himself, moving through middle age toward elderly, he reflects often on the life he's lived. It wasn't the life anyone would have predicted that night in Godric's Hollow when Voldemort attacked. It wasn't the tragic orphan story or the pure hero's journey that stories usually tell. It was messier and more complex and richer than that. He was raised by his mother and his mother's former best friend, turned Death Eater, turned spy, turned stepfather. He was sorted into Slytherin and had to navigate the expectations and prejudices that came with that. He fought in a war and survived when many didn't. He built a career helping others, raised children, contributed to making the Wizarding World genuinely better. The what-if question that started this entire divergent timeline, what if Severus Snape and Lily Potter raised Harry, had profound ripple effects. Harry's personality developed differently, more strategic and cynical, but also deeply loved and secure. His magical education was more comprehensive, giving him advantages his original timeline counterpart lacked. His understanding of moral complexity was more nuanced, having been raised by someone who embodied the possibility of redemption. His relationship with Slytherin House and all it represented was complicated but ultimately productive, helping break down prejudices and reform the house's culture. But beyond the specific changes to Harry's life, this timeline also transformed Lily and Severus themselves. Lily got to live, to raise her son, to find new love and purpose after loss. She became more than a martyred mother. She became a researcher, an advocate, a teacher, a partner. Her contributions to magical theory and social reform outlived her and improved countless lives. Severus got the redemption and acceptance he never thought possible. He transformed from Death Eater to protector, from isolated and bitter to father figure and eventually respected headmaster. He proved that people can change, that past mistakes don't have to define your future, that love and choice and sustained effort can reshape a life. The broader Wizarding World benefited from this timeline's changes as well. Having Harry Potter sorted into Slytherin forced a cultural reckoning with house prejudice that might not have happened otherwise. Seeing Severus Snape successfully raise Harry demonstrated the possibility of redemption in concrete terms. The reforms pushed by Lily and supported by Harry's generation created lasting structural changes to how Muggleborns and magical creatures were treated. The educational philosophy that Snape implemented at Hogwarts produced students who were more thoughtful and less susceptible to dark ideology. Perhaps most importantly, this timeline demonstrated that family is chosen as much as given, that love can grow in unexpected places, that trauma doesn't have to define you forever. Harry grew up with the love of a mother who survived and a stepfather who chose every day to be better. He created his own family with Hermione, passing on that love to his children. His children grew up in a world shaped by the choices their parents and grandparents made, a world that still had problems, but was fundamentally more just and kind. When Harry is old himself, teaching his own grandchildren simple spells and telling them stories about their great-grandparents, he sometimes thinks about how different everything could have been if James had been the one to survive instead of Lily, if Dumbledore had insisted on placing him with the Dursleys. If Snape hadn't offered Spinner's End as sanctuary, if Lily hadn't chosen to give Severus another chance, if Harry had fought the Sorting Hat's suggestion of Slytherin, any of these different choices could have led to vastly different outcomes. Worse in some ways, perhaps better in others, but definitely different. But this is the life that happened, the timeline that played out. Harry Potter was raised by Lily Evans Potter and Severus Snape. He was sorted into Slytherin House. He fought against Voldemort with the support of family and friends. He survived, built a career, married, had children, contributed to building a better wizarding world. He watched his mother and stepfather live full lives and eventually pass away peacefully. He grew old surrounded by love and purpose and the knowledge that his life mattered not just because he was the boy who lived, but because he chose to live well. In the end, that's the real magic of this timeline. Not the spells or the battles or the famous moments, but the quiet transformation of broken people into a family, of enemies into fathers, of survival into true living. What if Severus Snape and Lily Potter raised Harry? The answer is that Harry would be fundamentally shaped by that upbringing in ways both obvious and subtle. That Lily and Severus would be transformed by the experience of raising him. That the entire wizarding world would ripple outward with changes from this single divergent point. The boy who lived would become a man who thrived, not despite his unusual family, but because of it. And in the space between what was and what could have been, in the choices made and roads taken, there would be redemption and love and hope. There would be family forged from impossibility. There would be a future worth fighting for and living in. And that would make all the difference.